David Galbraith, welcome
to
the Mojo Wellbeing podcast.
Privilege, thank you.
DG, or the Hog Man, as you're affectionately known by many that you've worked with. David, for the audience, who are you?
So, I love the question off that. There's layers that come to mind for me, Andy, in that. The first one is I'm a son. And often people will introduce me to do something, and I'll talk about the things that things I've done, places I've been, and faces in those places. But they never introduce my mum and dad. So I'll always introduce my mum and dad, Kane Vince, off that. So I'm Kane Vince's son, second son. And, I think about who I am a who because of them. And so without them, none of anything I've done would have come to pass.
Yes.
And I look after mum and dad now, and that for me was always a motivation, recognising who I was because of them. So who am I? The first thought will go to being a son. Then the second part, when you ask me, would I go to be a dad? So I have two daughters, 22 and 19. And so if I think about those layers, my identity is strongly linked in the sense of service. So I've, for example, in the winter, I'll wake up and light the fire at 4 o'clock in the morning for mum. I know she gets up at 6 o'clock to make a cup of tea, so I want the loud warm in the Ohara in the winter. Yeah, pretty close to the mountain, so it can get pretty cold.
So mum and dad are living with you, David?
Yeah, mum and dad live in, it's funny because they live in my house.
Yep.
Maybe about 8 years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I went to mum and dad and said, well, you looked after me for 20 years. It feels only right now that I offer you and, I was speaking to dad, and you and mum an opportunity to come and live with me for 20 years. And I said to dad, if you kick around for a little bit longer, well, then it's, you've made the best deal of it.
Yeah. And
I said to go earlier, well, it's one for me too.
Yeah.
So we had some banter around it, and long story short, I just said, look, I'll pay for your toilet paper, your beer and your ammunition until you die.
Yep.
And I remember saying, it's quite a nice offer, son. I would chat to mum. And then long story short, they've taken me up on that. And my vision with that is that I want mum and dad to wake up every morning and look through the eyes of a 5-year-old. So I want them to wake up with a sense of, what are we going to go and play today? With no financial worries, no worries about who's going to look after them if they dement later on down the path, and they're approaching 80 now. And it's a real thrill to me every day to see them smile, and often when I'm going out to do a bit of work, if I'm going out to work with a business or something, the deck's a beautiful King Country deck that looks up some stunning valley, and they're sitting on the him and her seat, and then as I wave goodbye, you can really see the young in their face and their eyes. So I really see the 5-year-old sitting there. So who am I? First and foremost, I feel like I've got a duty to honour with my mum and dad, so I'd say I was a son, then a dad. My daughters are amazing people, both very different. First and second borns are, as people say, and parents know, just chalk and cheese, but still clearly the same genetics and nurturing. So then I would think, okay, so then who will I go to? Well, I'll go to, I'm a dad, so they're my daughters. I have a beautiful partner who, for me, would be the lady or the person I'd probably try hardest to get to if the world ended. So she's a deep spiritual connection for me. But I put her third just because of my honouring my mum and dad, but I put them and my daughters, but I put her in that same sort of mix. So then that's an interesting way to define what I am in that relationship, in the sense of, now we're moving to soul and spirit. So I'm a son, a father, shared cosmic atom, probably. If you start to look at it that way, the way that we roll. And then if I go that step further, who am I then takes me to what am I? And so that sense of identity that starts in my whakapapa and my mum and dad and my daughters, so what's before and what's after me. So that's that part that I conceptualise myself in relation to time.
Yep.
And then I conceptualise myself in relation to matter. So when I look at myself from a structural point of view, I recognise that 99.9% of me plus is space. So then to say I'm a physical solid is, in my view, incorrect. I'm actually, if I look at myself physically, I'm more space than I am solid. So therefore, when I look at what that means is I feel that what am I is, or who am I is what am I, which is energy. And recognising that that's a fundamental part to understanding well-being, and it's a fundamental part to understanding my identity, and a fundamental part to understanding the nature of things.
Yep.
So my conceptual side holds me as a son and a father and a partner.
Yep.
If I then go experiential side or metaphysical side or epigenetic side, I'm merely matter at various degrees of size. Now that becomes really relevant when it comes to well-being and mental health, as well as identity, because my conceptual side says I'm these things, but it's merely a name. So I'm given the name of son, I'm given the name of David, I'm given the name of dad, and partner, lover, etc. But for me, I really ask people to go deeper than that, because that's merely a conceptual framework that we've given to something that then means something to me and to you and to people of the same culture. But we take away the verbal part of that and you're left with, well, what does that actually mean? Whereas the energy side of things I found incredibly beneficial, because at the end of the day, or for me at the start of the day, the whole process of becoming conscious, so from the unconscious realm of sleep to the conscious realm of being awake, is understanding that that transitional shift is one of energy, and becoming aware of self as a conceptual thing, and that mostly people go, I'm becoming aware of self, and that self may have an up day or it may have a down day for whatever reason. But if they broke that down, in the end, what they're saying is, I feel a certain way.
Yes.
If we then break that down, what does that mean? Or it feels like I have energy, or it feels like I don't have energy. It feels like I'm up or I'm down, or I feel polluted, or I feel whatever, distorted, and whatever it might be with my energy. But you can see how if we start to go deep in that space and you go, well, who am I and what am I, becomes paramount and fundamental to conversations of well-being and fundamentals of existence. So if I then go, what am I? I'm merely space, and then I go, I'm merely energy. And then that brings me all around to a lovely little place, which I go to every morning in my rituals, because I love a guy called Sadhguru, and I really like the way that he thinks. I listen to his Om chanting. I use that on my headphones to create a resonance. And I do it with a long black coffee and dark chocolate. So it becomes a ritualized way that I start the day, but the essence of it is that when we understand that we're merely space, we then understand that we're nothing. Of course we're something, but if we broke that down at the end of the day with the way it all comes together as a whole sense of, I'm not David, I'm not my name, I'm not my title, I'm not my history, I'm not my future. Those things are present because of the structures that we give substance to these things. But at a fundamental level, who am I? I'm a product of my mum and dad, who's created a legacy through my daughters. So the chromosomal, the social genetics being passed on both ways. And then if I can really settle myself down, my ego quiets, because at the end of the day, I'm actually nothing. I'm nobody, in a beautiful way, because I'm a part of an energy form that exists across the whole universe, not just here in Hamilton. And as soon as I go there, I go, sweet. And it's a real interesting place, because my psychological dilemmas are all related to concepts of attachment to something. So if I can stay, I still have them because they are part of being human. But my reference point through reflection is all of a sudden I'm invested in a process rather than a product. I'm invested in a way of being rather than an outcome of being. Whether I'm this or that, or whether I have this much or that much, or whether whatever is the product of it becomes so insignificant in the moment of trial and challenge. It allows me to check first and foremost, am I doing what I love with who I love? And then I'm in a place where I'll find peace, like you talked about before with the mono, which is the quiet mind, peaceful soul. I'll find that, because it's not that things no longer matter. They still matter deeply because of my service to my mum and dad and my daughters and my community. So that matters deeply to me. But in the bigger sense of things, this shall too pass. So if it's good, appreciate it, love it, but it shall pass. If it's not good, because of the contextual creation of stress and whatever it might be, this shall pass too. So you can start to see how it really gives a real framework which helps my mental well-being. It helps mature my ego. It helps get clarity on what's most important in the hierarchy of human needs and psychological needs and, wider, I think, humanitarian needs. So who am I? I'm all those things. And then really where it's got to over the years is recognizing that at a point of me being those things, if I can come at it from I'm not my body and I'm not my mind, I'm not my name, then you and I can connect at a really different level, because now I'm listening. That's quiet. I haven't got a process going on waiting for you to finish. There isn't any sense of whether this is useful or not useful. It will be what it is. So it allows me to be, with you at this time, then to leave and be with other people, and then leave and be, and then just continue being. Then I go unconscious to sleep. Wake up and I go, sweet, got another one.
To just be.
Go again, just be. So it's all presence. The art of presence, I reckon, is the essence to all things. But at no point does it remove the responsibilities that we hold within being present. So I'll have a relationship with the ANZ Bank for a long time. I'm responsible for that because I signed the paperwork. Wherever I go and do work, I've signed a contract to go and deliver some objectives. That's my responsibility. So even being present in the way that I talk about it doesn't absolve me of the responsibility that exists within the rules of the context that life creates for us. And I really enjoy that, because that then brings the pressure, which brings the catalyst to performance, which then adds whole other layer to the way my energy's felt. So pressure becomes my best friend, risk becomes my best friend. And one of the people we spoke about before one day asked me, what's the difference between courage and stupidity? And I went, plan. And they were like, yeah, I like that. So you can see how inside the essence of that, the whole definition of courage is plan.
Yeah, I am at quite short notice. I'm reading your book, David, because I've been on a wee Forrest Gump on a bike. But one of the things I loved in there around your principles for what you call Pathway 1 are the golden rules. And to your point, one of those is absolute attention to detail, being meticulous, disciplined. And there's also an element of the importance of values. You mentioned just before Katsumono, which having done a bit of research on you, watching a beautiful podcast from the Good Day Matrix around discovering your authentic self, you talked about the code of the samurai. Do you want to just expand on that a little bit? Because I love that, especially the last bit, which is the literal definition of Katsumono, which is pretty cool. And I think given where we are in the world today and the way our kids might be struggling in the world, I think it's really important.
Yeah, there's something about the Japanese people which I think a lot of people really resonate with. And I can understand why people really love the Japanese and the Japanese love people. There's something about the way they operate, and that's not new for them. Like the way they operate. I had a beautiful stat, which I think it's lessened a little bit, but 98% of people in Japan are Japanese. So if you think how old the country and the culture is, they have held that way sacred forever. And you can see why they've chosen to do that, to keep it original or pure, in the sense of the value-based, the community sense of you work for, not for yourself, but you work for the greater good. So, I've been fortunate to spend a little bit of time over there, and part of my role was to really work deeply with themes.
That was with the Japanese rugby team.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that whole sense of theme and that sport will always take you to Samurai history. And so I started to do a lot of reading in that area and talking about it with people, and that my understanding of Bushido is it's the way of life in every breath.
Say that again?
Life in every breath, or life in every breath.
Okay.
Because the essence for them was death was only a breath away.
Really, anyway.
So there was a real sense of treasure each breath and live it fully. So I really resonate with that, because in the game of rugby you've got 80 minutes. If you can have a philosophy which is, live every breath with the same intensity and ferocity that you have for wanting to live, and not so much not wanting to die, because one of the principles from that whole sense of what is samurai was a raw acceptance of passing and death, and not seeing it as a one-dimensional thing.
Yep.
So there's something about the relationship we have with death and failing, which then allows us to live and win. And so if we take a competitive place, a lot of elite athletes that are very, very successful early in their careers have had to learn to lose, which then allows them to win. Often the ones that have never lost or know how to lose, I find that they struggle to know how to win.
Yep.
So there's an interesting paradox there, in the sense of, to find true performance, we can only find it through losing. And lose something, you learn something.
Yep.
But if you can approach it in a way which is, the lesson is as rich both ways, so there's another conversation about how we learn best. But certainly the Kuzemono, which was Katsumoto, who was really one of the big names, I guess, in samurai history, along with Miyamoto Musashi, they're probably the two main ones for me. A lot of work on researching. There's a real sense of the quintessential weirdo was someone that lived the way of the sword.
So that quintessential weirdo, this was a process of looking at Katsumono and getting the direct English translation. Is that right?
So it's actually Katsumoto was a samurai, and Miyamoto Musashi. So those two are big names within their whakapapa.
Gotcha. Yep.
There's a word Kuzemono.
Kuzemono.
Yeah, so Kusemono. That's literal translation is quintessential weirdo, which is beautiful.
Amazing.
Yeah. And what it meant, but it's adjusted over time. So what it meant in the 1500s is exactly what it meant in the 2020s. In the 1500s, it referred to someone that was absolutely in alignment with the 7 values of Bushido, or sometimes 8. So courage, service, sacrifice, loyalty. Those type of values underpinned the sword, and it was done in a way to give some sense of order, because they were also so deadly. So it was their way of building it, in some way of helping the young warriors control themselves, because they
must a yin yang type balance. Yeah.
So they, I guess, quite simply, they hoped that by holding to the way of the sword, they weren't corruptible and would be moral.
Gotcha.
So the ones that lived the way purely, no surprises, are also deadly. So you combine those two things, and they stood out from everybody else who were cut corners, didn't have integrity, self-served rather than served others, strutted rather than didn't own anything, minimalism, gave this life to service of, the fight against the evil rich, in service of the vulnerable poor. So you get some idea about what it meant, that because they lived that way, it's like Mother Teresa as a Kuzemono, and she made everybody else look a certain way, and Hillary as a Kuzemono, because the way that he lived his life made everyone else look average, but in a way which was not his intention. But he was so beautifully dignified and a man of service and humility and generosity and, that whole sense of, Ed. I don't know Mother Teresa very well, but that was my take on her. So you can see what, in the end, it portrayed a person whose inner workings was about the outer reality and a way of giving rather than taking. And it was the same in the 1500s. So that term is still, for me, as applicable, as beautiful. And if school and education had their wits about them, I know most people within policy around education mean well, but certainly the education system misses a major opportunity to shape our teenagers from, say, 12 to 13. So really, academia could be paused for a year from intermediate school, what we call intermediate school, to high school, which is the 11, 12, 13 block. I don't believe as a clin psych there's any academic advantage by having that year being driven for maths and physics and sciences. They would say that's not true, but if we follow through the stats, the learning they make in that year versus where they are in year 13 actually did something to question that and check it.
Yep.
Because if that year was around identity and community, so as your class, every person in the class learns where they're from, and you've got to travel to where they've landed in this country and know the story and share the story that part of the week. And then the rest of the week is you are in your community looking after the old people, building gardens, cleaning streets, planting trees for one whole year. And then as part of that, you also do a courage course. And at the end of that year, you sit down with all the people at school that can help guide you about building your plan for the next 4 years academically. And then you get to work in the academic sphere. If you did that for that 4 years of academic performance compared to the 5 years with the year of identity and community, the indicators of well-being and suicide and mental health plus the academic markers would be night and day. We would have young people come out of year 13 loving learning. For example, would have teenage boys still doing math if they chose and want to do math. So there's a whole layer in there around that. Learning to be outside the box, the Kuzem. And creation that the Western world thinks is the right way for development to happen.
You mentioned the word purity.
Yes.
Pure. And what struck me when I started going through your book, which you can buy on your website, I think, Dave, Unleashing Greatness, is when you've worked, and at the start of this interview, some of that might have been going over people's head, but there's an element of ruthlessness, and in elite sport there's nothing more pure, because at the end of 80 minutes or 90 minutes, whatever sport you played, there's no hiding.
No. Right.
So what really struck me in the book around purity, there was a quote by one of the golfers that you've worked with, and when he really grasped the concept of Pathway 1, it was almost like a surrender, and as well as surrender, an absolute commitment to go for it.
Correct.
Not to hesitate.
Correct.
To take risks.
Yeah.
And he shot a 62, won the British Open qualifier. And the thing that actually made me laugh, and I thought, well, I would so rather be in that state, was when his caddy said for the first 9 holes, they were talking about fishing and beer. So that ability for the mind to relax, but just be so focused when the time comes to make a shot, and to have no fear. So, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about, because Pathway 1 is the core of your book,
for sure.
The secret to unlocking courage and not pushing away fear. In fact, one thing I want to talk about, which I loved, was the snake experiment and the relationship between courage and fear. And not saying fear is bad, but actually recognising it and appreciating it, because it's a prehistoric thing that actually keeps us alive. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about some of those golden rules around Pathway 1 and the ability to unlock your courage?
Yeah, there's a lot in there, isn't there? And that one, I guess the essence to hold that together as we talk through it is if we can hold from the beginning how I talked about energy. And if we take a concept of energy as always present, it can only be transferred. It can't be created nor destroyed from my physics at school. That real essence, if we understand the energy's there. The whole essence of Pathway 1 is understanding our work is to become present. There's, as you said, there's layers in a recipe. So Pathway 1 is living from, essentially from the book The Pathway of Courage, versus Pathway 2, which is living from the Pathway of the Coward. And people often, and I appreciate it, people find the word coward, it's very socially loaded. But what I want them to see is that in the moment, the difference between the courageous person and the cowardly person, the courageous person will have a plan and step towards the thing that makes them distressed or uncomfortable. I always cover this too, though, by saying when I talk about fear, I'm not talking trauma. So clin psych, it's real important that we make that distinction. So trauma is something that's happened to us, and there's a whole different conversation and duty of care around it. General fear, which is based on day-to-day living, and you talked about the amygdala before and the limbic system. Now we're talking generalised stimuli that comes to us from the context of our world on a day-to-day basis that affects everybody the same way. We're now talking general fear. So I'm talking general fear. So, for example, the Pathway 2 means that people will move away from things that leave them uncomfortable, distressed, or afraid. Whereas Pathway 1 will have done a lot of layers in there and figured out that actually the distress, the fear, the discomfort that they feel is it's a compass. And so the idea of Pathway 1 and Pathway 2 is just merely helping people see that at each major step in life there's a decision to be made. One is stepping forward into opportunity, one is to move away from opportunity. So at essence, that's its basis. Then within each of those there are layers which sit as a process that then results in that happening. And so if I take Pathway 1, the essence of it is courage as a concept. The essence of courage is to be able to be completely present within the moment and have done a plan. The whole idea about the degree of planning separates out good to great to phenomenal, in my view. The phenomenal ones are the ones that do what they love with who they love, and they plan meticulously, deep. It's beyond most people to attribute enough time to do that. And they love the planning. It's all part of the process for them. So if I can then hold to, well, Pathway 1 is about being present in the energy of movement forward. Pathway 2 is about being present in the energy of moving away. So you've got two energy forms happening, same energy, but two different directions.
Do you mind if we segue to talk about that snake experiment? Because that blew my mind. That concept of choosing courage, then the 6 seconds, and the courageous act. And I had to watch it 4 or 5 times to actually get my head around it. Do you want to just explain that experiment and then based on what was observed with, I think, 16 people?
We're 60 years.
60, 60, sorry. Can you talk us through that?
Sure, and I guess the proviso on it is my take of it. Thinking about it for many years and probably adding a couple of things, but the essence of it was it does make sense to people. So all they did was they wanted to investigate what the brain did when people chose to be brave. So it was a really clean courage experiment. To help set that control group and experiment group up. The experiment group was 60 people with a diagnosable snake phobia. An MRI tube, a conveyor belt that operated from the same room and came from their head to their head. So the line in the tube and the conveyor belt came up to their head so they could see it. and a control box, which was basically 2 buttons, but 3 options. So you can choose to bring the snake closer, push one button, take the snake further away, push another button.
So these people are petrified of snakes?
Yes, right. So they're petrified of snakes, and they've been asked to participate in a study looking at courage.
Yes.
And they would have said, basically, feel free to make the decision that you want, to make the snake go further away or bring it closer together, or do nothing at all, which is leave
freeze.
Freeze. So there's 3 options, 2 buttons. What they found is that every single one of the 60 participants had a reaction in the limbic system, specifically the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain. So it's seeing the snake and having a reaction. And the way that I describe this for people is their amygdala is going, ah! So it's screaming, snake! And then because everybody's got it, the way that I look at that is it's a neurological wiring. So if everyone has it and within a group of 60 people, that's telling us that what we're looking at is there's no variation. How you explain that is it's a neurological wiring within the brain.
It was built in to protect us.
Right. Correct. There's a self-preservation principle. We see something that triggers off risk like that, we're going to have a reaction to then supersede thinking and get us into action. What they also found is not everybody pushed the button to make the snake come closer. So now straight away we've gone from everybody having a fear reaction to not everybody having a courage reaction. So now we can't say courage is neurological. So if it's not neurological, it's habitual. So some people had courage, some people didn't. Some people have learned courage because it's a habit. Some of the others, because everyone had a fear response. It's clearly not learned, it's wired in.
So courage can be trained and practiced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, the way I looked at it, the understanding experiment was everyone had the moment, snake. Some people had the meow, meow, and some people had brr. So you can see how in that moment, a different area of the brain, they actually saw that, different area of the brain woke up. Because the hypothesis was that fear would get less when people were braver, but the fear stayed the same. The fear center just did what it did.
So coexist.
Coexist. So you go, the yin went whoa. Some people had a little bit of yang and some people had a lot of yang if they go fear, courage. Now when we start to look at that, what that actually means is that for me, the real essence of this is that in that moment, things have happened that led people to respond to the way that they were feeling where others didn't. So like you said, courage can be learned. And the way that I look at it is more than likely the social genetics and the experience of the person that pushed the button to make the snake come closer just to be scared now brave. As I like to laugh and think about it, what was more than likely they had a gran who was a snake hunter. So they've grown up with a social legacy that within this family where we had to hunt snakes as kids, which is another way of saying, because the snake is merely symbolic of COVID, of inflation, of any adversity that comes at us down the channel, which can be losing our job, having to change provinces, some sort of financial crisis in the world. I think high inflation that we've all had to deal with for a while. The COVID crisis is one that's most present for us in remembering. So all of those things represent the snake. And what I noticed through COVID is some people absolutely panicked. A very small group of people absolutely thrived. So there's the snake experiment in the moment of COVID. Screaming amygdala, because everyone was like, what the hell was this? Because when we first came, no one really knew. In that moment, many people were meow, meow, and some were brr. And they created new businesses, they brought about changes in their lifestyle, they adapted really fast, they built online communities, and then thrived. There's an example of the snake experiment live. My understanding from the experiment is there was also a delay, so regardless of whether we're looking at fear or courage, the brain was already making its decisions neurologically before we made a decision with our thinking and our behavior. So for my understanding of the research was, see the snake, so there's the stimulus, there's the presentation of the stimulus to our sensory system. The brain has now reacted to that because it's faster than our thinking. And then my understanding was it was 6 seconds, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, which feels like an enormous amount of time from seeing the snake to pushing the button to either make it go further away or come closer. So they saw the snake, 6 seconds, then they pushed it. So this is the bit where I thought I had to think about it a bit more, is the neurological reaction was immediate. See the snake, amygdala's awake. See the snake, amygdala awake. So that was immediate. Then it's a delay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then they push the button. So pushing the button might feel like it's immediate to us. But what's actually happened is when we've pushed it, everything has already happened 6 seconds before. So the brain's already decided, am I going towards this challenge or am I running away? So when COVID hit, the way that people were wired is they'd already decided to have, they were already going to have that, but they'd already decided whether they're going to do meow or before they did or thought anything about what was happening. The system at a neurological level had already activated. Now that's really important, because what it means is that when we have big problems come at us, do I start a business? Do I go for a job? Do I go for a job promotion? Do I just start a whole new business and start something completely outside the box?
Yep.
Before we actually write the bit of paper on the plan, write on the paper the plan, or we actually sign the contract to take the bank loan, for example, we've already decided that we were going to do that based on what our underlying rituals are and habits are over time. So if we are committed to be brave as a daily habit, when a big challenge comes, we will be brave. But if we are afraid, it's not so much afraid. If we avoid or escape from pressure, challenge, adversity, fear, then when it comes, we're automatically going to be running away.
Predisposed almost.
Yeah. And in line with that, the other thing that really came through in the experiment, which I thought was profound, was that the people that pushed the button to make the snake go further away had an increase in their amygdala heat. So they actually got scareder when they pushed the button to make the snake go away. So what that means in life straight away is when we run away from that worries us,
Gets bigger.
it actually gets bigger. And I'm like, far out, that's what my mum used to say. So you can see how that little experiment really helps us. Pathway 1 is about stepping towards. By habit, integrity is a plan. Integrity is stepping towards that makes us afraid and uncomfortable and nervous. Pathway 2 is by nature the choice to avoid or escape. It's no judgment. They're still really nice people. It's not a judgment of people. It's just understanding the response that they will show in a moment of challenge and adversity, or what I call opportunity.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's inspiring, because when you think about things like neuroplasticity,
Correct.
you can train your brain.
Absolutely.
You know, you can rewire your brain.
Yeah. Unlike yours.
And everyone has a superpower.
Yeah. But so we don't lose that. And like what you just said then, Andy, you talked about phones before. For people to understand how this actually works subtly without them realizing they're being conditioned, as I always ask people, what's the biggest button on your iPhone when the alarm goes off in the morning? And they're like, I don't know. I said, well, you have a look. Because on my iPhone, the biggest button when the alarm goes off at 4:30 is the snooze button.
Dismiss, yeah.
Right, or dismiss. So if we think about what that means, and this is really important for people to understand, is the unconscious mind, its first language is experience, not speaking or thought. So we can say certain things about ourselves and it helps us feel a little bit different. So we can get our language right, and that helps us feel a little bit different. The thing that makes us feel most different is an action. So the unconscious language base is actions, not words. So it's constantly watching and sets its parameter or calibration for life off our habit history. So in the morning, if we go snooze, there's 3 days, 7 days, snooze. Each time we push snooze, the unconscious is watching. It now sets the calibration up that when challenge comes, because the alarm is basically saying, bah, 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 get up, right? The challenge, right? So you're faced with the challenge. Your first response, snooze. Now inflation comes, bah, 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 bah. First response, snooze. So no matter what it is, you've now been set to calibrate at 50%, which is the middle of the bell curve. 68% of people in the population will more than likely snooze that button.
Yeah, that's
More than that, because you've got the bottom side as well, so maybe 80 to 90%.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but just when you said that, it reminded me of this mantra of singing at 110 decibels, which I love, because I was always the kid that had stage fright. I would never go in the school play audition, but when I was at home with my family, I loved acting up and being a comic and a clown, and I didn't feel like I'd bring my true self. And, you know, in a corporate context, I think for forever, I had the belief that I needed to be this other person, rather than the person that I am and where I've come from, and being true to that. So do you want to just mention this? Because one thing that really resonated for me on the 110 decibels was, if you use that as if you're only ever willing to sing at 55 decibels, you will only unlock half of your potential in life.
Correct.
So do you mind just sort of talking to that?
Yeah, you've done a really nice job of introducing it, and like it's a lovely metaphor. What sits underneath the metaphor too is another key part, which is if someone's learning something new, the research is very clear. What will take us, let's say, I think it's roughly 450 rote moments of rote learning, or learning something new mechanically and robotically. It takes us roughly 450 times to really get it. If you brought play into it and learn through play, 10 repetitions.
Wow.
So you can see straight away, again, our education system rote is based on rote learning.
Yes.
Very few teachers are immersed and understand music and play and movement. Yet if our education system was steeped in play, music and movement, the learning of our kids would be through the roof. So that one stat, learning something new, 450 repetitions versus 10 repetitions. So wherever I go, I'm trying to bring play into skill acquisition, sitting down work, classroom-based work. So then singing became a natural part of me creating that energy. Because I'm also working in energy, decibels became a natural concept and point of measuring. And so wherever I went, I've got a decibel meter on my phone. I ran a number generator, and so I'll have groups sing, and the teams that I'm working with, so rugby's obviously been my main sport.
Waikato Chiefs, for example.
That's right. When they had sessions with me, they weren't allowed to leave the room until they sang at 110 decibels, and I just had 110 because the difference between 100, it's quite easy to sing a big group at 100, but it's a big step to go to 110.
Yes. And
so I just say, men, the metaphor here is, and the coaches were obviously all part of it, we're all aligned about what it meant. Your performance is merely the decibel meter reading. So a performance at 100 decibels versus a performance at 110 decibels. Performance at 100 decibels of energy versus 110 decibels of energy. That's how we talk about it. Everyone gets it. And so they weren't allowed to leave the room until they were singing 110 decibels. And even now when I'm doing one-on-one coaching online, the very first session, when they share their goals, they'll share their goals and I'll honour their goals. And then I'll say, what I want to do is share with you my goal, which will be the glue for us to get your goals. And then I actually sing at them. The ants come marching in, and they're like, whoa. And I'd say, what is that about? And have a conversation about the metaphor of singing your song. And then I'll put the invitation to them to sing with me. And they'll have their phone on with a decibel meter they've asked them to download before the first session. And then we keep a track of the decibel reading over the 4 sessions, with the idea that I want people to be freer and freer and freer, which is merely bringing more energy to the same context.
So I guess if you use courage as a proxy, it's moving toward that.
That's right.
Pure.
That's right.
No hesitation.
That's right. And all purity reflexes presence. So the more present we are, the more we are, and we hear that often used, in the moment. The more in the moment we are, the more unconscious we are. The more unconscious we are, as we won't remember what's happened. Because we're not consciously there. And then those moments, athletes will have a rough idea about what happened, but they can't tell you about it. They've got to go and watch the video. And then they are right in the moment. And that's the idea of life. We want to be in the moment.
So a few years ago, given we're in Hamilton And by the way, I wanted to acknowledge the Novotel at Tainui for making this space available, which was extremely kind and generous.
Beautiful spot.
The Waikato Chiefs, so, in the days of, I think, Mills Muliaina and some of those players had never won a super title, and I think yourself, Dave Rennie, Sir Wayne Smith got together and 2 back-to-back, which is almost unheard of.
It was just those days for the Chiefs.
Yeah, so what do you reckon were some of the... and it may not be specific to, the sports psychology component. It might be culture, values, whatever. But, what do you reckon were some of the anchor points that allowed that team to... Because there's nothing more beautiful than a bunch of individuals coming together and doing something amazing. So what do you reckon were some of the keys to that?
Yeah, there's a couple which they stood out for me then, and they've continued to stand out now. That was it's a long time ago now, 12, 13. The first one is the history to 12 is that we didn't have a venue, we didn't have a home. So 2012, we were pre-seasoning at St Paul's Cricket Pavilion, for people that know this area. So
Smithy talked about this. You guys had to pretty much go scrappy and come up with your own.
That's massive. Yeah. So we didn't even, for a while, we weren't sure we were going to be paid for the season or anywhere.
Yep.
So we moved away from the stadium, and with the idea of creating a home. And so we're based at the pavilion, and as a result of that, whenever we wanted to do rugby, the men had to hop on push bikes and travel around all the schools. So we would go all the schools in the summer, so St John's and Pan Boys and St Paul's, and we made sure that we visit all the local schools to train.
Yep.
So straight away you've got an ingredient there, which is we were in the community from the get-go. We were
almost that we.
Totally, yeah. And the men were constantly having to realise that they weren't bigger than the community.
Yep.
So they're having to wait for the traffic lights, and they're having to drive together safely and be part of the community to make a good impression on the kids who are on bikes. But then they're in the schools, on grounds that were just hard, rough and ready. So you can see how that sense of appreciation and sense of understanding that what they did was all about family and fans and community. There was a huge... That's a huge part. So that's for me, one of the key ingredients was the humility that came from having no home. We were essentially on the streets, finding places to throw a rugby ball around that anyone and everybody can come to. There's your first ingredient. The humility factor was massive. It created an electricity and a buzz within the team that we couldn't create any other way. We had no gym, we had no running area, no aerobic area, no conditioning area, no flash running tracks. That's pretty much the Jamaican story, right?
Yeah. The bobsledders.
Totally.
Cool.
And so that's the underpinning. Then when we found a home, it wasn't even a home. It was an old research building at the Rural Research Centre at Rakura. So it was a factory, engineering workshop, with a 4 or 5, maybe 40 or 50 ton pulley in the middle of the big area. So that was what we found through Tom Coventry was one of the coaches, and his father was the overseer of the whole Ruakura Research Centre. So it was by chance they said, well, we've got this vacant building, you guys might want to come have a look at it. And so Renz and the crew went and had a look at it. And then the dream, Renz is a visionary, amazing man, visionary. Deep,
Dave Rennie.
So steeped in community. And so that was where the vision started. And then we had to come in as a team and knock out walls and paint and put toilet paper on the room toilets and just set up.
Had guys like Richard Carr, who were builders,
and Sonny Bill Williams was with us then as well. So you had some amazing people that just rolled up their sleeves, never complained once, and that was the start of an energy but for us internally it felt quite inevitable we're going to win 12. We lost the Highlanders in round 1, and we just thought that as just an ongoing growth, and then we knocked over the Crusaders. No, I think we knocked over the Blues at home by like 50 points the next week, and then knocked over the Crusaders in Hawke's Bay and just blew them apart. And then it was from the inside, it was inevitable then that team was going to win the championship, unless really serious injuries ripped through key players, but that didn't happen. So you can see how the foundation to the culture was deeply of humility, a real sense of belonging and home and family that was deeply strong within the team. So you can see that for me would be a critical component. But this is the human values we're talking about. But then the performance values were just as sacred. So planning, preparation, prehab, rehab, all of the fine details to then be able to perform in combat were considered sacred within the team. So all those names that were in that team that had social resonance abided by the non-negotiable values of performance. You combine those two things together and you've got a very powerful mixture. And then I believe probably the third thing I'd say is that the training was harder than any game. So not all the training, but we had what we call the red sessions or the blood sessions. And that was, Miss Smith and I have talked about that, but it was a 5 or 10 minute block once or twice a week where it was demanded and expected from the players that the intensity of training was to be more than what we would play. They would play. And then the coaches would have established the training in such a way that made it like that. So defensively they would have 15 scrumming against 8. Or however they would do that. So it was impossible for the Scrums to win. But they were required to go beyond. And so everything in the training there was about going beyond. The competitive niggle was always there, so it was rough and full on. And that's where I learned then, and I understood that for a while, but I learned train to win. Now we saw train to win, and some of my history was very clear when I got to that stage of my career, was that your performance, you don't rise to performance, your performance drops to your level of training, or your performance rises to the level of your training. And then that's the secret. So you combine that with what we've talked about, you add that third one in, and then you've got something that individually people might not be doing much mental skills or psychology work, but those three elements of belonging, that essence of humility and what we talked about in there, and then you add in the performance values, and then part of the performance values is what we just talked about. You add those three things in and men become more without having to come and see me and do psychology or mental skills. They just naturally become more within the culture and the ethos and the energy of the team. And so we had average rugby players become great rugby players. We had great rugby players become phenomenal rugby players and become All Blacks that year. So we had lots of youngsters and lots of oldies. The youngsters went nuts and became All Blacks. The average men who weren't in that group became great rugby players, but they would never be All Blacks. So everybody, the ceiling went through the roof. The ceiling went up versus trying to pull the floor up. And then that's the other thing is, I reckon, to win a championship, you need an energy like that too, where week in, week out, you've got players just doing beautiful things.
Awesome.
Every 12.
I'm gonna switch gears slightly, because one of the, I guess, my guiding principles around Mojo is inclusion. And you know, one of my own little quiet objectives is to have as many women in this series as men.
Awesome.
So that it resonates for everyone. So the viewers will be very pleased to know that after Swain Smith and yourself, there'll actually be some incredible women. When I was doing my research, you were talking about this concept of fear and courage and the raw. This concept of the lioness, I loved that.
Totally.
You know, when I thought about that in the context of my kids, it was beautiful. And there was also a discussion around share of wealth and how unfair that is. And you know, there's probably a lot of people out there that will look at your book and say, well, how can the normal person get past this? How can I go from feeling disempowered to empowered and have that courage? Can you talk a little bit about that idea of the lioness? I think, you mentioned your daughters and their gravestones, which I loved. It was really cool. And also the existential weirdo was powerful.
Look, I reckon the essence of the lioness for me, I love too, because we both have two daughters, and then they've been in the big way, if they go and look into my background, they'll see that they're a big part of my life, and then the book is pretty much about being a parent. The bit I really want to add in there is, for me, the lioness, because a lot of women will see themselves as a lion, because the lion is by gender, it's a male and a female is both called the lion, and I really like that. So there's a lion and my daughters, and people ask me how do I raise my girls. I just really clear say I just raise them like boys, and they say, why do you do that? I said, because I was a boy. So I surrounded them by women.
Yes,
and of course their mum's also a great old lady as well, so they've had good woman mentors. And I guess the essence of that for me is I wanted them to understand it was okay for a woman to also stand up for themselves.
Yep.
And so early on I supported a really nice lady who was a very good martial artist and mixed martial arts, and she often said, look, I'd love to give you some money for your support. And I said, look, I don't want your money, but one day I'm going to ask you for a favour. And that's the way it will go around. I'll help you now and you'll help me later. And then when my girls were 12 and 9, I messaged her on the phone and said hello, and she messaged back, is it time, is it? And so I had her come in twice a week and take my girls into the shed and shut the door. And then she would just pad them up and then teach them how to be in a fight and fight.
And to defend themselves.
Yeah, and the key bit, as I said to her, I want them to learn how to move through the shock of being punched in the face.
Yep.
Because that's the bit that often gets people, is the shock of being hit, because they've never been hit. And so that's the thing that puts them on back foot straight away in self-defense, is they actually aren't comfortable with being hit. So it was just a point for me, is that my daughters had a beautiful upbringing, really sheltered, really nice, and as a result they're really soft, gentle, kind souls. The biggest risk factor they had is they thought the whole world was like that. And I want them to grow up with that sense of that first, but to also understand there's a bit of a Jack Reacher world as well through each child. If you read his books, there's a hard edge to life, which if we aren't aware of it, I don't believe we see it, and therefore we can make decisions which aren't real world. So for me, the lion, I saw needing some couple of elements. One was that I can look after myself, period, physically. Secondly, that I wanted them then to own their own business so they could look after themselves financially. The greatest thing is they both have pulled out of university, thus taken a year or 2 years just to figure out what they want to do, which I'm absolutely right.
Oh, really? Because when I watched the interview, I think your eldest had started at Otago.
Yeah, it was in psychology.
Yes.
So she's finished off the BA part.
Oh, good on that.
That's it.
Yeah.
And now she's taking time out to travel and make some money. And as I said to them, I said, girls, I'm most excited by that, because you now need to decide how you're going to be in this world. And I said, if you've got agency over revenue, you have agency in life. So there's some nice stuff happening there. The key bit that underpins that, though, is which is a real critical discussion to mental health, which is how we define success. And so what are the expectations we place on ourselves each day when we wake up? A lot of people will place an expectation as they have to be perfect. They can't fail. They have to be better today than they were yesterday. They can't say one thing wrong. They can't get one thing wrong. Everything has to be a certain way, otherwise catastrophe happens. I can't stop, otherwise catastrophe will happen.
Yep.
So we're really starting to tap into some deep beliefs from the psychology side of things that influence whether the lion or the lioness, the lion is woken up or not. Because if we have my expectation is I can't fail, or success equals not failing, the lion will never wake up. Yeah, because to wake the lion up then means you push a boundary, push an envelope, which then risks failure. So you see how those two things can't live together?
Yep.
So I work very early on with the girls around conversations about what the heck is our expectation as we go to play netball or go and play basketball. And so the Honda Motor Company, just very quickly, has a beautiful history. And from the very first speech from Mr. Honda when he opened the company in 1904 is, I demand that we blow up 100 engines because 100 years will be a revolution.
Yeah.
An engineer that signs for Honda today, 20,025, signs a contract that says if you're perfect, we'll fire you.
Yeah.
Unless you blow up engines, we will fire you, because they understand that if you're perfect, you're careful, you're conservative, and you will not extend beyond. So you can see how, for me, if we're going to wake up a lioness, there's a couple of layers in there that I've talked about that need to be festering and growing from an early age. Yep. We can start at any age, but the earlier we have that, the more eager they are to put their hands up and learn and lead. And then you add in there success equals failing, which is blowing up an engine. Now you've got a beautiful recipe that will not only free up women to step forward and not care what people think, but care more about having integrity to their identity and being who they are. Authentic weirdos. They'll also push envelopes, they'll also push beyond doing those things, and then we've got a magic recipe where they no longer hold to, I guess, the middle of the bell distribution curve. They're non-conforming, but in a beautiful way. They're not knocking over letterboxes, they're asking questions, stepping into spaces that were considered not appropriate before, asking why not. And then that's where you start to see a real magic. And I've got some beautiful Japanese friends, and he and I are doing some close work, and we've got this thing which is, it's all in Japanese, and it's a beautiful vision, which is this family in front of I guess it's the rising sun for Japan, and just the essence of the mountain for them, Fuji, Fuji, and the whole sense of, it's what it says is, when the lioness wakes up, miracles happen. And it's that whole sense of, we don't have to bring anything else if we can just layer those foundations, help them see that, empty the tank, blow up engines. This is what the real cake is. Then we'll go and have duckville and ice cream. And that's all we want them is to learn that, because that in itself is always integrity. Integrity is different than.
Yeah, and I think also makes life so much less stressful.
Makes it fun.
Yeah, you know, I was chatting to a good friend of mine, Rama. Normally I'm in Byron Bay. Rama's in his mid-70s, surfs every day. Yeah. He's at Broken Head every day. If there's no surf, he'll paddle out anyway. And I shared with him some of my vision around Mojo, and he went, Mojo, more joy. Yeah. You can have that for free. Yeah. And yeah, you know, I think again about, you know, your golfer that hits a 62 and is just chatting about fishing and beer, you know, there's all of a sudden the stress falls away because you're just being true.
That's right. And then you're able to free up, and then I think laughter is in all of us when we can move beyond feeling that our expectation is to have to be anyway.
Yeah. Well, the Dalai Lama giggles a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah. That's the 5-year-old, isn't it?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. I'm mindful, David, of respecting your time.
Thank you.
So I've got one more question which I love, and I will always ask. You know, I've coached teams since I was at high school, soccer, but you know, in a corporate context, I've led and coached teams. And one thing I always ask people in one-on-ones is what's your really unbridled, audacious vision? You know, and I've got a vision for Mojo from now until December 28, which for me is so clear. If I'm lucky enough to be interviewing you again in December 2028, what do you think you're going to be most proud of between now and then? Because you've actually gone quite consciously not ended, but you're moving into a different chapter of your life, and we talked offline about one of those initiatives, which I think is amazing. What if we're chatting in December 28, having a beer before Christmas, and I say, David, what are you most proud of? What do you reckon some of those things might be?
Well, I'm working at the moment with a good mate, Ellen Vandernet, and she and I started to take everything that you and I've talked about today onto an online platform.
Mm-hmm.
And the vision I had for many, many years was that get 1 billion parents to download it.
Mm.
So the vision is 1 billion parents will download this program,
Amazing.
online
Yep.
learning module program, which is fun and enjoyable, which is about waking up the lion. So that's, I guess, a very specific vision, which in my sense of how I word it is, the program is really about helping parents raise cool kids to become robust adolescents who go on to become adults of integrity who contribute significantly to their family, their friends, and their communities. That's the picture. So that's part A. Then part B is that within Ohura, we've created a rural community support system that allows farmers and, that's women and men for me down there, and their families to thrive. So I've got a real global vision, but also got a really local at home for me, which would be when I start my wool shed and move out. So those two things, if the Ohura family farming network is flourishing, and our snail races at the Cosmopolitan Club are going off every month, I'll be wrapped by that.
Yes.
And then the second one is if work that Ellen and I are doing takes shape and is available online, because the idea is to get it in a way which is, essentially free. We want it to be just like something people can go to and just go download. That would be pretty epic. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I've got some other things I'm doing, just my fun really as well. That's fun, but I believe pathway 1, you have to have integrity living it. So I'll keep that one private, because if I say it, it then changes the relationship. But I always make sure I've got my own personal private pathway 1 being challenged every day.
Yeah. Which
then for me feels like it's crazy as the way I see it is that's the cosmic currency that I need to be a manifester.
Yeah.
So unless I'm doing that, none of these things will happen because I haven't created the energy.
It's almost like a credibility thing.
That's right, because I've got to get my energy to this level to create something that, so to generate something that goes to 1 billion people, your resonance has to be friggin' high. So then I have to live at that frequency to even get near that ever happening. So then I just make sure that I've got integrity, and people need to listen for themselves. When you wake up, is your first act snooze? Because if it's snooze, you're going to generate and manifest a layer of life which is at the same frequency.
Yep.
So that will be, then if we catch up again, those two things will be taking shape.
Cool.
And that'd be pretty epic.
Awesome. Well, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time, David. It's been amazing and not surprising given the research I've done. And I absolutely love your work, and I know it inspires a lot of people, and I do hope you do realise that vision, because it'll make such a positive difference locally, the local cockies in the Waikato, but globally as well, which is pretty exciting. So thank you.
And thank you, Andy, for everything that you've talked about that you're already doing, and I love the vision and I love the energy that you bring into Mojo as well too. So the well-being space. It's I'm really some wonderful people in that space, and knowing that you're in there as well just warms me, mate. That's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully see you December 28th.
Yeah. Thanks.